Okay, so quick question. Let's say that a player character dies during the course of an adventure and they return as a mindless zombie. Would that be sufficient justification to argue for an increase in the character's wisdom score? Today, we're going to be talking about the Book of the Dead, specifically from a player character's point of view, on today's episode of The Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello, travelers and tourists. My name is Mark, and I'm the local disaster tour guide. That's right, I'm a storyteller who is about to make a bunch of ghoulish puns. Yeah, I'm not even sorry for that one. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Book of the Dead, the most recent release from Paizo for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Now, up front, I do want to let you all know a couple of things. First off, you may notice that this is a brand new format in terms of how I'm doing my book reviews. And that is because Paizo actually sent me a PDF copy of Book of the Dead for me to review. So up front, do be aware that Paizo has provided me a copy of this book, and along with it, a copy of Knights of Lastwall. So be on the lookout for Spellslingers Academy, where I might be previewing some of the Knights of Lastwall spells in the near future. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that this review is made possible by Paizo sending me a preview copy of Book of the Dead, so I want to say thank you to them for that, but I do also want to note that Paizo has not scripted this review in any way. They have not told me what they want me to say, they haven't given me any particular points that they want me to make, and I'm going to do my best job during this review to provide my honest opinions of the product that they have presented. Now, I will say this, I don't have it in my hands yet, but I have actually ordered my own copy of the physical special edition Book of the Dead, and I'm hoping it'll be here in the next week. I'm using the PDF for review, obviously, but I can say that I am interested enough in this product that I still went out and purchased my own copy of it because of the options and information that Paizo has provided. So I would hope that that statement offers at least some sincere sense that I am interested in this product, and anything nice that I say about this product comes from my own genuine observations. And I will also be honest on areas where I feel like this product may be a little bit weaker, or where I might wish that Paizo had approached this product in a different fashion. Still, as with any review that I do for any product on this channel, let me just go ahead and give you my universal grain of salt, which is this: you should always try a product before you buy a product if you have the chance. Checking out a product at your local game store, borrowing it from a friend, things like that are going to give you a far better idea of whether or not a product is right for you and your gaming table than listening to the opinion of some random guy on the internet. Still, with all that out of the way, I am excited to dive into this product, to take a look at some of the things it has to offer, and to share my thoughts about this product with you. So, let's get started. Now, up first, let me give you some basic information about the Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead is a 226-page product that is all about, well, the dead, the undead, fighting the undead, new types of undead, archetypes related to the undead, and new player options surrounding those concepts. The book itself is presented as a series of scrolls that were stolen from the mighty necromancer Geb, and that reflect the centuries of work that he has spent studying the nature of necromancy and undeath. This book is divided into roughly 5 different chapters, which you will be able to see on the left side of the screen: Prayers for the Living, Hymns for the Dead, The Grim Crypt, Lands of the Dead, and March of the Dead. This book is available in hardback format from Paizo for $49.99, and you can get the PDF from Paizo right now for a price of $14.99. The special edition, which I've noted is the one I've ordered for myself, is $69.99, and sometime in the next month, the pocket edition of Book of the Dead will be available as a small paperback for the price of $24.99. I don't know the exact release date on that, but it should be coming soon. Additionally, Paizo's website notes that the information from this book is available on the Pathfinder Nexus through the Roll20 VTT, and you can also access much of this content for free through Archives of Nethys. And I'll actually throw a link to Archives of Nethys and some of my favorite material from this book in the video description in case you want to go there and check some of it out. But basically, there are a variety of different ways to get your hands on this content, and I do think that Paizo has brought some interesting stuff to the table. But for those of you who are familiar with my reviews, you know that I like to begin at the end, give you my overall thoughts on this product, and then work my way through this product to kind of share with you how I came to the conclusions that I did. And that is where this review is going to get complicated, because as you may have noticed in the intro, I am doing a player's review of Book of the Dead. Okay, so this has kind of been a running theme in many of my reviews for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, in that both with the mainline products for Pathfinder 2e and the Lost Omens products for Pathfinder 2e, the books that they produce are often in this weird place where they're not quite a player resource and they're not quite a game master resource, but rather they're kind of a mixture of the two. We've seen this with several of their previous products, and Book of the Dead is easily one of the strongest examples of this. There is a lot of material in this book that is very much geared towards players and represents cool options and things that players can do, but then there's also stuff that is very much geared towards game masters, to the point that I actually would feel bad about presenting that information in a video that players might observe, because it could be a spoiler for players and possibly ruin their fun. So ultimately what I decided to do was to split this review into two parts. This part, the first one, is going to take a look at the content that I consider to be the player-focused content in Book of the Dead, and then on Sunday I'll release a second part to this review, which is going to be focused on the Game Master content. And if you are a player who doesn't want the Game Master content spoiled for you, I would encourage you to avoid that second review, just as a way of not running into material that might take away from your fun at the gaming table. But I guess I should go ahead and give you my actual grade for Book of the Dead, and because of the nature of the review I'm doing here, also give you kind of a subgrade to go along with it. So my overall grade for Book of the Dead for Pathfinder 2nd Edition is a B to B+. I'll admit I've gone back and forth a little bit on exactly where I want to put this product. I feel like it is a very usable product, and that puts it in a strong B category for me. And there is certainly a lot of good stuff in this product that I really enjoy, but there are also a few things that I kind of wish they had gone a little bit further or done a little bit differently that I think could have pushed this to an even better status for me. I'm going to cheat a little bit and say that the overall grade for this product is a B or B+, and depending on my mood in any given moment, the answer of which of those two grades specifically would probably change. But for this video, I want to go a little bit further and give you a player's grade for Book of the Dead, and the player's grade that I want to give you is a C+. Okay, so when it comes to this book, I have something of a dilemma in evaluating it. This book is very much geared towards game masters. If I were to divide this book up into percentages, I would say that roughly 2/3 of the material in this book is game master focused content. This book skews very heavily, at least in my opinion, in favor of the game master, and I feel like typically the game master is going to be the person who is going to be reaching for this product and using this product. Meanwhile, when it comes to player-focused content, I would say that that probably represents about 35% of this book. So overall, players just get less content here. But the player content is really good. It's kind of the best part of this book. Like, don't get me wrong, as a game master, you're going to use this book a lot and you'll definitely appreciate what's in here, but it's the player focused content where it really feels like Paizo has brought their A game to this product. And so, even though this book is less immediately useful for players and would qualify as a C tier product in the way that I would usually evaluate something, I have to say it's a really strong C tier product and there's a lot of fun stuff here. So, the player content is really good, even if ultimately it's going to be limited in its use and scope. Ultimately, in my opinion, I think that this product is probably best purchased by a game master, by the storyteller for a group. But as a game master, if you pick up this product, I would certainly recommend making the content inside of this product available to your players because I think there's a lot of cool stuff here. But let's dive in to some of the player focused content and see some examples of what this book has to offer. Now, when it comes to Book of the Dead, there are 3 chapters that I think players are going to be potentially interested in. Chapter 1, Prayers for the Living, Chapter 2, Hymns for the Dead, and Chapter 3, Lands of the Dead. So, let's look at them individually. So, Chapter 1, Prayers for the Living, focuses in on content for living characters that are dealing with the undead in one fashion or another. And you can see over here on the right side of the page a summary of some of the content that players can expect to find. We're going to take a look at some backgrounds that characters who are dealing with the Walking Dead might want to consider. We're going to take a look at the Slayer's catalog, which has some interesting items that PCs might want to use. And there are 4 different archetypes that are available in this chapter: the Exorcist, the Hallowed Necromancer, the Soul Warden, and the Undead Slayer. Now, before we dive into Crunch, I do want to mention that this chapter does include several organizations that are known to hunt the dead that might serve as employers or allies for your players if they are battling undead in your campaign. You have organizations like the Arch Lords of Nex, the Bright Lions from Mazzali, or the Church of Pharasma, who are all motivated to hunt down undead and to put them to rest. You also find groups like the Knights of Lastwall, the Gloom Warders, and the Nidalese Resistance. While the information here is relatively basic, all of this could serve as inspiration for players who are trying to build a character in a campaign that is dealing with the undead, and this could easily be a source of inspiration for you. Next up, you have a selection of backgrounds that are associated with, again, dealing with undead, and you have both common and rare backgrounds that a character might take. Here, for example, you can see a couple of backgrounds, such as the Grave Robber and the Night Watch, both of which could fit very classically in an undead or ghost-related story. You also have a number of rare backgrounds, including the one that I find the most interesting in this particular section. The Willing Host. Due to your background, you have the ability to speak to spirits, and you gain the ability to host a spirit to allow it into your body and to gain benefits from doing so. Next up, you have the Slayer's Catalog, and I'm not going to go through every single item here, but the Slayer's Catalog includes a variety of items that an undead hunting PC might be interested in using. For the Alchemist on the team, you have Bottled Sunlight. And by the way, can we just stop to appreciate the fact that Paizo is remembering to include options for the Alchemist that might be battling against the undead? I think it's cool that they remembered to put not just Bottled Sunlight, but actually a few different alchemical items into this book so that the alchemist class is still a viable option for players in this style of campaign. You can also find magical items such as the Grim Ring, which you can use to try to locate undead creatures in your area, or consumables like life salts, which can be used to deal persistent positive damage to an undead and possibly dissuade them from attacking you. However, the inclusion that has garnered the most interest at my gaming table is peachwood. This is a unique type of wood that is cultivated and harvested by the Church of Pharasma, and that is particularly effective at warding against the undead. Now, it's worth noting that peachwood loses its magic if it comes into contact with metal, meaning that peachwood items require advanced carpentry skills and have no metallic components so that they maintain their effectiveness when employed against the undead. As you can see here, peachwood can be used to create regular items or structures, and they even have rules for peachwood talismans and peachwood weapons. This is one of those materials that I could see being a really interesting inclusion in a game, and if you had a craftsman who wanted to invest in some advanced carpentry, this could be a fun and creative reward for that kind of character. Also in the Slayer's catalog is a description of several folk remedies that people might try to use against the undead, and a discussion of whether or not these folk remedies might work. Some remedies, such as a circle of rowan trees, might actually have an effect, while other remedies, such as growing a willow tree in front of your front door, ultimately has no mechanical impact whatsoever. But they dive into some of the superstitions, some of the folk remedies that people might be used, and in addition to offering some neat mechanical niche options, it also just adds a ton of flavor and lore to the setting, and as a game master, stuff like this is a really beautiful inclusion. Now, up next, I want to talk about the Exorcist archetype, and I'll go ahead and tell you I'm not going to be diving into all 4 archetypes just because I don't want this video to be too long. I decided to go with the Exorcist archetype, mostly because my wife is just ridiculously excited about the Exorcist archetype, and she's probably going to take it, so I needed to read it. So the description that Paizo gives us for the Exorcist is that you pacify restless spirits, ghosts, and haunts, capturing fragments of them and using their vengeful energies to fuel your own powers while purifying the spirit. You store these ghosts within a magical vessel called a spirit dwelling. This spirit dwelling might be a treasured family heirloom, an item you crafted expressly to help with exorcisms, or even just an odd trinket that you found that happens to do the job. And I just want to acknowledge the really cool artwork. I love this gnome, and I love the picture of the ghost that is like trapped inside of her mirror that she's using as her spirit dwelling here. Fantastic artwork. So the Exorcist archetype can be accessed at level 4 through the Exorcist dedication, which is pretty easy to get into. It just requires that you are trained in either the occult or religion skill, and that's all that you have to do. The effect of this is that you will find or create a spirit dwelling, and that you use this spirit dwelling to attract wisps and remnants of different spirits, and to help purify them and release them back into the cycle of souls. Every day during your daily preparations, you can spend 10 minutes to try to attract a wisp of a spirit to come and stay inside of your spirit dwelling. This is pretty much assumed to happen automatically, and storytellers, unless there's something crazy going on, you should allow this to happen automatically when daily prep occurs. While a spirit is residing inside of your spirit dwelling, it glows faintly, shedding light in a 10-foot radius, and gives you access to a special reaction called Spirit's Mercy, where you can release the wisp that is stored inside of your spirit dwelling in order to gain a protective benefit. This reaction is triggered when you would take positive damage, negative damage, or be damaged by a haunt, ghost, or any other incorporeal undead. And basically, it's going to give you damage resistance appropriate to whatever it is that is harming you. If it's positive energy, you gain positive resistance. If it's negative energy, you gain negative resistance. If you're being harmed by a haunt or a ghost, you essentially have resist damage all against that particular haunt or ghost. And you'll note that the resistance is equal to twice your level for whatever attack it is you're defending against. That's pretty awesome. Now, there's another concept we'll talk about here in a moment called remnants, and the mechanics are slightly different for remnants, but you still get a pretty healthy benefit if you're sacrificing a remnant instead. But essentially, you convince the spirit to release its pent-up emotions and protect you from something that might harm you. Exorcists can also gain access to the Cast Out feat, which can allow them to counteract possession effects. Spirit's Absolution, which is an action where you can spend a wisp or a remnant to heal an adjacent ally. And they also gain access to Spirit's Anguish, where you can again spend a wisp or a remnant to deal damage in a 30-foot cone. The last Exorcist feat comes in at level 12, and that is Enticing Dwelling, which allows you to draw 2 spirits into your spirit dwelling at a time rather than just 1. Now, a couple more details on the subject of the spirit dwelling and the wisps and remnants that your character attracts and uses. First off, if your character spends a spirit wisp, you can, as a 10-minute activity, attempt to attract another spirit wisp to come and dwell inside your spirit dwelling, so you can refresh your spirit dwelling repeatedly throughout the day. Also, wisps are kind of regarded as just the natural fragments of a spirit that might exist anywhere and everywhere around the world. Remnants are more specific, and this represents the spiritual residue of incorporeal undead or haunts that you have successfully defeated. Basically, after your exorcist defeats a ghost, you can use the 3-action activity to collect a spirit remnant from that ghost or from haunts or other similar creatures, and store that remnant inside your spirit dwelling as well. Now, it's worth noting with the flavor of this archetype that expending a wisp automatically releases it back into the River of Souls and takes care of that particular wisp. Remnants tend to be a little bit stronger and may not be automatically purified. However, when a remnant is expended, if that spirit would remain for one reason or another, you will automatically gain some insight into what might be binding that spirit to the material plane, so that you have some more information to help ultimately purify that spirit. And my wife is really excited to play one of these, so I definitely need to keep this stored inside my head. But I love the storytelling potential here. I think it's a lot of fun, and as you can see, there's not a heavy feat investment, so it's pretty easy to get into the Exorcist archetype, pick up a few abilities, and then move out of the Exorcist archetype into other options inside the game. So this is something that I definitely enjoy. The next section is Chapter 2, which is Hymns for the Dead, and this chapter is geared more towards campaigns where, rather than fighting the undead, you are using or maybe even portraying the undead. Now, there is a ton of stuff in this chapter. There's a long discussion about necromancy itself. You also have a couple of archetypes, the Reanimator archetype and the Undead Master archetype, which is found a little bit further down in the chapter. Nonat has actually done a pretty solid review of the Reanimator archetype, and if you want to know more about this archetype, I would definitely recommend checking out his video because he did a pretty good job covering it. However, I imagine that most people are going to be interested in a particular section of this chapter, Undead Allies. So, Paizo has gone out of their way to offer rules for bringing undead companions along with you on an adventure. The first option we have is for the Summoner class, which allows you to have an undead eidolon that follows you around and that grows with you throughout the course of your adventuring career. Next up is a section on undead companions, which mostly is going to refer to animal companions, but might refer to other minions that you can get as well. But as you can see here, you have things like a ghost companion, a skeletal mount. The stats are not on this page, but the vampiric tiger in this artwork here is amazing. I love this thing. You also see a skeletal servant on this page. Here's a reference to the vampiric animal that we saw the illustration of earlier, and rules for zombie companions as well. Up next is undead specific familiars, And I'm not going to dive too much into these here, because I am going to be doing a Familiars video later this month, so I'm going to be including Undead Familiars in that video. But Paizo does give us 4 options: the Crawling Hand, the Old Friend, the Polong, and the Talking Head. And allow me to just say, the Old Friend artwork of this adorable zombie dachshund this is just amazing. There is some fantastic artwork in this book, I just want to say. But they do include rules for these 4 different undead familiars. And then after the undead familiars, you come to the second archetype, which I mentioned earlier, which is the undead master. The reanimator focuses on calling lots of undead into battle for you, while the undead master focuses on having 1 or 2 more powerful undead that serve by your side. So that's kind of the difference between these two. A lot of things like the undead companions are assumed to be accessed through the undead master archetype. They are uncommon, and you need this archetype in order to be able to take them. Theoretically, you could access them through alternate means, but that is going to be very contingent upon Game Master approval. Overall, the Undead Master is kind of a morbid take on the Beastmaster archetype from the Advanced Player's Guide. It's very similar to it. It pulls a lot of the abilities from the Beastmaster, but serves to give you access to the undead companions that you might be interested in. There's a section on deities of undeath, such as Urgathoa, as well as Charon, Zura, Kabiri, at least I think that's how you say that one, and Orcus, as well as the edicts, anathema, and other traits associated with those particular deities. And then you come to a section called Playing Undead. And this is a section specifically designed to give players access to the rules to allow them to play undead characters. And in approaching this topic, undead characters are going to come with basic and advanced undead benefits to represent kind of the mechanical implications of playing an undead creature. So, when you first become an undead creature, you'll have the basic undead benefits, which are noted at the start of this section. One of the most interesting and important is the concept of undead hunger. All undead have some particular need to feed that is determined by the type of undead that they are. So zombies require brains, vampires require blood, skeletons require bones to help repair their body. Every type of undead has something that they need in order to continue to survive. At some point during an undead character's progression, they may also gain access to the advanced undead benefits, which are listed in this section as well. We have a sidebar about becoming undead, starting out as undead, healing undead, including the Stitch Flesh feat that can allow a character to use the medicine skill to treat wounds on an undead character. All of these just kind of handle the weird nuances and interactions associated with undead characters. And one thing that I want to point out really quick, there are a number of different archetypes associated with undead characters in this particular section, and like most archetypes, they are normally available at second level. And so the picture here is kind of if a character were to die during the course of a game, they could pick up that archetype or retrain into that archetype to allow them to continue the story, but now in their undead form. So you could have a character who is slain by ghouls who retrains into the ghoul archetype and then begins adventuring as a ghoul. And same thing for ghost or husk zombie or what have you. Now the assumption with this is that you have a normal character who dies and then becomes undead and sort of retrains into the archetype. They do, however, note that a character might be interested in playing a ghost from level 1 or a husk zombie from level 1. And in that instance, basically the character can start the game with the archetype, but at level 2, they must take the archetype dedication feat in order to progress their character. So it's kind of like a very flexible version of a class archetype in that way. The Lich, which unlike the other archetypes in this section, is actually a level 12 archetype because the prerequisites are a lot more demanding. And I actually want to stop and say I really like the Mummy because this one feels the most flavorful for me. Like over here, you have the one with the land archetype feat, where the Mummy gets benefits based on essentially the terrain that they were buried in. And I really like the flavor of that, and the flavor of a lot of the other mummy archetype feats. You also have the vampire, and the zombie archetype. You've probably heard me refer to husk zombies a few times during this video, and the explanation for the zombie archetype is that some zombies are created and preserved through special necromantic rites and alchemical processes that allow them to maintain at least some of their intelligence, and so you're not a mindless zombie, but rather you have the physical form of a zombie with some of the mental capacity intact. So those are the different archetypes that are available, but there's one more character option that I want to talk about here. The Skeleton Ancestry. Yes, that's right. You can play a skeleton from level 1 and they have the stats to do so. Now, this is a rare ancestry and, get Game Master approval before creating one of these, but they have 6 hit points. They are typically medium size, but they have a base speed of 25 feet, ability boost to dexterity and charisma, plus a free ability boost and ability flaw to intelligence. They come with common and necral as languages. They have the skeleton and undead traits, and the basic undead benefits that we discussed earlier. Skeletons also come with 4 heritages that you can choose from. Each skeleton heritage is basically a description of what kind of creature the skeleton used to be. So the fodder skeleton represents kind of your typical humanoid skeleton. Now obviously this could be humans, but anything that is roughly human shaped, such as humans, elves, that kind of stuff, can be a fodder skeleton. And fodder skeletons increase their base speed to an impressive 30 feet. Compact skeletons would be associated with creatures such as goblins, halflings, and gnomes, and they are small size rather than medium. They gain the quick squeeze feat even if they aren't trained in acrobatics, and tight spaces that are not tight enough to require you to squeeze are not treated as difficult terrain. Sturdy skeletons are associated with hardy creatures such as dwarves or orcs, and they're basically more durable. They have a base of 10 hit points instead of 6 and gain the Die Hard feat. And then last but not least, you have the monstrous skeleton, where you are a skeleton of a monstrous creature of some kind and gain access to a natural attack, such as a claw, horn, tail, wing, that kind of thing. Now, I'm not going to dig into all of the skeleton ancestry feats. I'm just going to say they're amazing and I love them. But here you have an option to play a skeleton from level 1, and there are some very interesting story opportunities that this presents. This kind of closes out the content in Chapter 2 that is geared towards players. Now you may notice that the end of Chapter 2, over here on this side, it has a section called Ghost Stories and a section called Haunts. Both of these sections are very much geared towards Game Masters, so I'm not going to show them here. Players, I would not read that material if you are worried about spoilers. That is definitely GM content. However, as a player, you might want to check out Chapter 4, The Lands of the Dead. Now, this is a little bit of a guide to different sections of the Galarian setting where the undead are common, where facing the undead might be common, or being undead might be common. Now, 2 locations get a ton of detail in this section. One of them is the nation of Geb, that is home to the great necromancer Geb, who supposedly wrote this book to begin with. So, as you can imagine, it gets a ton of detail. You also have a section on the Gravelands, which is the area that has been devastated by the recent arrival of the Whispering Tyrant, and you get some pretty good information about that area as well. It's not quite as in-depth, but they also give you some information on the nation of Ustalov and some of the undead that you might be able to find in that particular portion of the Galarian setting. Ustalov is associated with classical Gothic horror, so you can imagine they get some good details on that. A lot of the other sections discussed in Chapter 4 don't get very much. For example, this is Mazzali from the Mwange Expanse. And those 5 paragraphs on screen are literally all that you get. Mazzali, Nimret no Katoria, Osirion, The Path to Valenhall, Shinmin, all of these get about half a page worth of information, and one of the locations that's described is Ordelia, which is technically the ghost of a hero that has become famous enough that they named one of the districts in the city of Magnamar after her. So essentially what I'm saying about Chapter 4, Lands of the Dead, is that as a player, you might be interested in reading up on these sections if you're looking for some history or some inspiration for your character. Maybe you are one of the quick that lives in the nation of Geb, and you've had to learn to survive in a nation that is ruled by the undead. Or maybe you're one of the people battling against the undead oppressing the city of Mazzali, and you're looking for some inspiration associated with that particular portion of the setting. Basically, these are nice, quick reads that can help you come up with character concepts. So I know that this video is already very long, and I just flew through a ton of player options. As you can see here, Paizo has done the work to give us an incredible variety of fun options. I think there's a lot of good content for players in this book, and I think you can come up with a ton of fun characters. But I do have a few gripes about this book, especially from a player's perspective, and one of them is almost no spells. If I'm being really technical, there are some focus spells associated with different archetypes in this book, but I was expecting some cool new necromancy spells in this book, and for the most part, you don't get any. And it feels disappointing in a book associated with battling or controlling the undead not to have new spells that your different spellcasting classes can use on their adventures. It really feels like a major oversight that all you get is a small selection of focus spells in this book, and I really wish that they had given us at least a handful of new spells. And then to kind of build on the lack of spells is the relative lack of spellcaster content. Now, it is worth noting that this book does include 3 necromancy feats that can be taken by a cleric, an oracle, or a wizard to expand upon their abilities to use necromancy in an adventure. But it also feels just a little bit weird that only the cleric, oracle, and wizard got necromancy options. None of those are occult spellcasters, and the occult spellcasting tradition should be all about undead, or at the very least incorporeal undead. How is it that we missed out on new options for the bard and other occult spellcasters when it comes to undead-related magic? And I'm gonna be honest, I was really hoping to see a new witch patron in this book. Book of the Undead seems like the perfect place that they could have dropped 1 or 2 new witch patrons along with the associated support material to really expand on the options that witches might be able to use. I feel like there was content here that Paizo just missed the opportunity to make. Also, while it's a relatively small complaint to the overall quality of this product, when we're looking at this product from a player's perspective, I do think it's worth noting that it's a little bit frustrating to have player and game master content mixed in together throughout this product. I mentioned in Chapter 2 how a portion of Chapter 2, Ghost Stories and Haunts, is explicitly storyteller content, and yet it's included in a chapter that has a ton of player-focused content, meaning it would be really easy for a player to go too far and spoil something that a game master might have prepared for them. I wish they had done a slightly better job separating out the player and storyteller content in this book. Overall, I understand why they have both inside of this product, but since this is a product that's going to be used by both sides of the Game Master screen, I wish it had been organized just a little bit better. Still, at the end of the day, I enjoy this product. It's a ton of fun. I can't wait to get my physical copy in, because I'm really going to enjoy pulling that out at my gaming table. But the time has come to turn the conversation over to you. What are your thoughts about Book of the Dead, specifically from a player's perspective, and are there player options that you are particularly excited about? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please remember to like it and share it. Subscribe to the channel. You can check out my free Discord as well as my Patreon, which are both linked in the video description below. And as I've noted, I'm going to be linking some of my favorite content from this book on Archives of Nethys, so that if you're interested in reading a little bit more firsthand, you can do so. But thank you for being here, thank you for being part of the conversation, and have a wonderful day.